Welcome to Trinity's annual Responding to Emergencies review. Ponder for a few moments the following statements. Oh, it can't happen to us. We usually see the storm coming. If it gets close, we will take cover. Plans are great, but where are they when you need them? Who knows the plan? Who is responsible for taking action? Why do we do this annual review for volunteers and staff? For the same reason that when you fly, the flight attendant says the same thing each time about exits, oxygen masks, flotation devices, and the emergency card in the seat back pocket. Repetition builds memory and muscle management. When an emergency arises, whether you're flying or at church, it is better to be exposed to the correct responses before you need to use them. Why were you selected to view this video? By virtue of the type of activity you as a volunteer or staff perform, you are likely to be the first to observe an emergency incident that could evolve into a personal or organizational crisis. Today, we're going to review these 6 subjects: crisis versus emergency incident, who's in charge, severe storm and weather events, fire and medical emergencies, and JDLR. First, let's get a little terminology cleared up. The difference between a crisis and an emergency incident. If a member suffers a heart attack in our lobby on Sunday morning, this is certainly a crisis for that member and their immediate family and friends, but it will likely not become a church crisis. On the other hand, if our senior pastor suffers from a cardiac incident while preaching and falls dead, well, that's an incident that could become an organizational crisis, a sudden loss of leadership. We have a detailed plan document that will lead staff and the executive committee through an organizational crisis. In this video, we are going to focus on emergency incidences. By virtue of the type of volunteer or staff activity you may be performing, you're again likely to be the first to observe an emergency incident. You may find yourself as the incident commander or the person in charge. This video will help you understand your duties. Any of you may become an incident command leader. You have the authority to take charge. The leader will communicate with early responders and directs congregation and staff for the protection of life and property. The leader also will inform the senior pastor or the lead pastor, Shawnee campus, or the administrator of the incident. There might be follow-up information that needs to be dealt with. Most incidences will be short-term and unlikely to become an organizational crisis. If the incident is long-term, we will hand off communication and management to a long-term crisis command structure. For incidences that do turn into long-term crisis, we have a detailed plan that defines the role and responsibilities of the church staff. The senior pastor will define the ongoing functions to manage the crisis. He becomes the messenger-in-chief. The lead pastor, Shawnee campus, will have duties delegated by the senior pastor, as well as be the spiritual and pastoral care leader. The administrator is responsible for interacting with insurance, fire, and police, directs our email broadcast and web updates to inform the congregation, and coordinates staff about assets and tools necessary to carry on daily operations. Staff will play an important communication role to assess needs and to coordinate with the administrator and pastors for continuing day-to-day operations. Those of you that are volunteers may fall into one of the subset groups and may be asked to play a role in the crisis management. Our crisis management plan is detailed in a full plan document. If you would like a copy of the full plan, call the church office. However, most important to you will be the trifold brochures. These are campus specific and can be found at the information welcome stations at each campus, as well as in the AV booth. Each trifold provides campus-specific emergency information and other important contact numbers. Now that we've talked about who is in control and that a plan exists to manage an organizational crisis, let's focus on some of the likely incidences you may experience. What should you do in the event of a severe storm or weather event? Be proactive. Monitor your smartphone weather app. The pastor will be concentrating on preaching, not the weather. During a worship service, be aware that you may need to walk forward to inform the pastor that the congregation needs to take cover for an immediate tornado threat, as well as be able to communicate to other groups throughout the building of the same threat. The tornado safe place at Mission is the lower level between the kitchen and education wing. At the Shawnee campus is the lower level restrooms. In the event of hail or an imminent tornado, do not let people exit the building. Shelter in place. It is better to have a hail-dented car than a concussion from hailstones. What should you do in the event of a fire? Evacuate the building and call 911. Be aware of the closest building exit and direct members to the exit. If someone needs assistance, grab a partner and help them out of the building. Be aware that emergency equipment will be arriving at our entrance. Send someone to the entrance to move people away from the entrance to make way for the fire department, and someone should be able to direct the responders to the location of the fire. What should you do in the event of a medical emergency? It is always okay to call 911. In the event of a medical emergency, let the professionals evaluate the individual. If you see someone with a potential medical condition, it's advisable to ask them if they would like help before offering assistance. We are blessed to have several medically trained members attending Trinity. In the past, we have been fortunate that professional doctors and nurses were able to assist in the emergencies. Don't plan on that always being the case. Be prepared to act. Stay calm, reassure the individual, ask them to stay in place if possible, and do not move an injured individual. 911 should be called for any episode resembling a seizure. Heart attack events sometimes look like a seizure. Try to protect the individual from thrashing or striking other objects. The safest position may be on the floor and on one side to keep their airway clear. If you call for an ambulance, someone should stay with the patient. Encourage a family member or person familiar to the injured person to stay with them for reassurance. The 911 operator will ask questions. If the patient is unable to speak or family is not available, someone will need to explain the patient's condition. Someone should go to the entrance to watch for the ambulance. Clear a path towards the injured person for the emergency responders. You may have to manage crowd control. Tactfully remind people that privacy is appreciated. Both MedAct and the fire department appreciate not having to ask people to make room for them to work. There is no charge if the person elects to not be transported via ambulance to a hospital, but time can affect the medical outcome. A delay in getting someone help with stroke or chest pain symptoms or a trauma injury can worsen their outcome. The responding ambulance team will document if a patient refuses transport. A refusal of transport form is normally signed, and that releases them and us from responsibility. Let's cover a few basic emergency best practices. Never offer water or anything by mouth, especially if they are confused or unresponsive. If a patient is unresponsive, call 911 first. CPR trained individuals can also apply AED. If no CPR trained staff are available, hands-only CPR is the next best thing. If there is blood, liquids, or a break in skin that you may encounter, put on non-latex gloves as soon as possible. Try to cover lightly with a paper towel or protect from view in case others may be affected. The goal here is to avoid having others injured, as some people have difficulty with the sight of blood and such. There are a few pairs of gloves with our AED devices. Only persons with basic first aid training or MedAct should provide first aid. Superficial cuts can be washed by patient or family member, and we have Band-Aids they can apply. An ice pack from the freezer can be offered with a paper towel between the ice and skin. If the patient is unable to apply firm pressure to control bleeding, wearing gloves, you can offer gentle but firm pressure to control bleeding until help arrives. Be vigilant. These conditions will require action to help the patient. Do not allow an injured person to drive themselves. Ask family or friends to help, or call 911 for ambulance assistance. If bodily fluids need to be cleaned up afterwards, clearly mark the area with paper towels and leave a message for the office supervisor or church staff to notify custodian so we can get the area cleaned and disinfected. AED or automatic electric defibrillators are available at both campuses. At the Mission campus, the AED is in the sacristy. At the Shawnee campus, the AED is in the usher closet, upper level, by the worship center entrance. If an AED is used, inform the MEDAC or first responders. At your earliest convenience, leave a voicemail or email message for the administrator so that pads may be replaced and we can have the unit serviced. And finally, a word about violence. Sometimes things just don't look right. JDLR. A key element to avoiding violence is awareness, paying attention to your surroundings. For example, an unrecognized individual with fixed eyesight and determined walk, wearing a top coat in the middle of summer, especially when one arm is not swinging naturally, may be bent on a violent action. Proverbs 15:1 reads, "A soft answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." Always try to de-escalate the situation. Approach and be friendly, even to the point of aggressively friendly. A bad guy does not want a positive, loving interaction. 911 should be called for any situation if violence is imminent or you feel threatened. We pray that we never experience a situation where we need to employ the tactics of lock out, the bad guy if possible, get out, run away as fast as you can, or take out, the last resort, fighting back with whatever you have. A final thought about violence. 68% of violent attacks happen outside the church building. The two top causes for violence, number 1, robbery and theft, and number 2, domestic violence spillover. The top 3 denominations with the highest percent of reported violence: non-denominational at 22%, Baptist at 21%, Catholic at 14%, Lutherans come in at about 3.8%. Is it going to happen here at Trinity? I don't know. But one thing I do know is that the police will not be able to prevent violence. Be aware of your surroundings. Remember the adage, if you see something, say something to a friend, and approach with the intention of de-escalating with love and kindness. Reacting to an emergency incident is a great responsibility. You are our first responders. You may well be the incident command leader. Thank you for your time and service to Trinity Lutheran Church. We are grateful for your service. Please feel free to contact our administrator in the church office with any questions you may have.